as Blue Beetle sits and stands on the precipice of the failure and the flop cliff. What does it mean? Whose fault is it that yet another DCEU movie is failing post-Snyder? It's a very, very complicated situation. But in terms of Blue Beetle and The Flash and Shazam! Fury of the Gods, it's pretty much a simple one. Lame mid-movies trying to echo the MCU. And you have to look behind this, right? Because these films were made pre-Gunn. Gunn is another problem, and Gunn is a problem, no matter what anyone thinks or says. He's a really good director, he's a good filmmaker, but he isn't who you think he is. But that's another problem. We'll get into that problem. But the main problem here is that they tried to copy the MCU. That's what the Hamadaverse was trying to go for. It failed with Shazam! Fury of the Gods, it failed with the Flash movie, and it's almost certainly failing with Blue Beetle, because not only did Hamada try and go for the MCU style movie, and don't get me wrong, the first few phases of the MCU were outstanding, and no one can say different, and it wasn't just cheap gags and mid-movies. But also with Blue Beetle, you've got the woke aspect, basically, of Phase 4 with some cheap gags. I'm all for Latino representation. But you've got to treat these communities and women the same as you do the white men. You've got to give them strong character arcs. But what happens is, these groups, by these white extreme leftists, are put on pedestals. You can't do this, you can't make them villains, you can't make them say this word, you can't make them say that word, they can't die, you know, Latinos shouldn't die because we get that kind of don't kill the gay thing. Ridiculous. Just because you're a gay character, how can you not die in a fucking movie, right? Plenty of straight white males have died in movies. This is the extreme left, they're insane, they've ruined this industry. So Blue Beetle was going to be a woke, actually is a woke, Phase 4 movie. It's a shame, because in Xolo Maradona they cast someone very special, very unique, and I really feel sorry for him. I didn't want this movie to fail, but it's going to fail, and it's going to fail badly. It made about 2 to 3 million in its previews, which is much lower than The Flash, and I think it's in line with Shazam! Fury of the Gods, and it's not going to make a lot of money. This film was never going to make a lot of money. And it's very, very interesting, because all this could have been fixed if we just go back in time. Let's get in my little DeLorean, let's open the doors, and let's look at the box office of MOS, Man of Steel, and Batman vs Superman, Dawn of Justice. Man of Steel made 650 million. Let's be clear about this. That's very good for an origin movie. Pre the MCU, right? Yeah, let's talk pre the MCU. Now, I think Iron Man made a lot more money, I think, than Man of Steel. But anyway, let's talk about this box office. The studio wanted more, that's clear. But, you know, 650 million is a substantial profit for that movie. Let's be clear, Man of Steel made good money. It just didn't make the money the studio wanted. Then we go to Batman vs Superman Dawn of Justice, which made 850 million at the global box office, broke a record for an opening weekend. It started off so well. An 850 million global box office when all was said and done. Again, that's a significant amount of money. Again, not the money they wanted, but not a flop. Why did Batman vs Superman make 850 million opposed to the 2 billion they wanted? 1 billion for Superman and 1 billion for Batman. That's how they saw it, right? That's not me, that's them. Anyway, why didn't it get there? Because it's just like Oppenheimer. Oppenheimer isn't going to make $1 billion. It's not making as much money as Barbie, because Barbie's an easy movie you can go and see, and that's why the general audience are going. Warner Brothers are winning with Barbie and losing with DC. There's a reason for it. Because isn't it ironic that they brought in an auteur, or Margot Robbie did, an auteur director, to make Barbie? And she made a really entertaining movie, a really extremist movie as well, but that's neither here nor there. The movie works, it's entertaining, and you know, she did a really good job. Isn't it ironic then that they had an auteur making DC movies and they got rid of him? So let's go back to Oppenheimer. I don't think Oppenheimer even makes BVS money, right? Maybe it will. Maybe it will creep up there. But again, you see, right, let's call Oppenheimer the DCEU BVS, right? Let's call Oppenheimer BVS, right? Or the DCEU, right? And let's call Barbie the MCU. Barbie is making over $1 billion, you know, probably $1.5 billion. Really, really good. It's the MCU, the general audience, when the general audience were interested in the MCU. And basically, Batman vs. Superman is Oppenheimer. It's an auteur movie, so it's not going to make $1 billion. It's not going to interest everyone. It's a bit divisive, you know, so not everyone's going to kind of go back for rewatches. But that movie, basically what we're looking at is Oppenheimer is going to make around the same money as BVS. Because Oppenheimer isn't for general audiences, and neither was Batman vs. Superman. You see, when they brought in Snyder, they had a decision to make. And the decision was quite really simple. Do we want a general audience juggernaut to make $1 billion to $2 billion, or do we want this auteur to do his thing? WB were an auteur studio. It made sense to make an auteur Batman vs. Superman movie. Tim Burton is an auteur. He made two auteur kind of unique, odd, beautiful Batman movies. Now, they made good money, but probably not the considerable money. Maybe Batman 89 did, but Batman Returns didn't, right? And there's all this controversy that, you know, they couldn't sell toys and they couldn't sell McDonald's lunches, blah, blah, blah. But at the end of the day, you have to decide what you're using these comic book characters for. Are they kind of juggernauts to make lots of money? Of course, they're a business. They want to make money. Or are you here to make art? You know, are you here to deliver art? Is it for the artiste, or is it just to make money? I think there's a pretty simple answer to that question. You can do both. You can have some movies that can be, you know, box office juggernauts, and you can have other movies that are not. And Batman vs. Superman and Man of Steel could have been the movies that weren't huge box office juggernauts, but made a profit. Because if these were just ordinary auteur movies that weren't superhero movies, WB would have been more than happy. But because they were about Superman and Batman, and Zack kind of was shaving against the grain a little bit, not for me, but for many other people, that's where the controversy comes in. But if people know this is just a director's vision, it won't be so bad. And ultimately, it doesn't really matter what the fuck people are saying. You're either a studio who supports the auteur director that as WB used to be, or you're not. They went against Snyder and they got rid of him because they decided they wanted to use superhero films as box office juggernauts. So they got rid of Snyder and they said, well, we've got no ideas. We've actually gotten rid of someone who's actually got plenty of ideas, and we haven't got any ideas. Oh, what should we do? Well, we want to copy and paste the MCU because they're making a lot of money and they're so popular. Let's do what they do. But let's not get someone to redo a Justice League movie. Let's just take Zack's movie and recycle it. It's interesting. I keep on reading this same article from Screen Rant, and it is very interesting that the mess started with Justice League. It was a ridiculous decision to make to recycle that movie, and they're still paying for it now. But the exodus of Snyder is what they're still paying for. Zack is a very fascinating fellow. Not a few weeks ago, he was saying that he was looking forward to seeing Blue Beetle, and that representation matters. But at the same time, he keeps on revealing new details, and his people keep on revealing new details, like Jay Oliver has about the Batfleck movie and other things from the Snyderverse. So one minute he's looking like he's a supporter of James Gunn in the DCU, then he does something that kind of tells you he really isn't. Snyder's playing both fields, and it's very interesting what he's up to. I'd love to be in the mind of Zack Snyder right now and what he's thinking about all of this. I mean, he's cutting at the moment the Rebel Moon trailer, teaser trailer. I'm really looking forward to seeing that. I think Rebel Moon is going to be outstanding, but it's clear that Zack Snyder wants to restore the Snyderverse, and there's no doubt about that. And I expect him to continue to want to do that. He could have gone on Twitter at any time and told people to stop fighting. He doesn't want people to stop fighting. The more I think about the DCU, and I've been kind of split on this, the more I think about what James Gunn is doing, the more concerned I am, and the less attractive it's beginning to look to me as Gunn makes mistake after mistake. But as I've said on many occasions, on many shows on this channel of mine, that Gunn is smarter than this. Surely he's smarter than this. And I've said this before, I don't believe he's in total creative control of DC Universe. And it's like we've gone back in time with Snyder, Johns, Berg, this one, that one. And you know what it smells of? That Toby Emmerich, the former CEO of Warner Brothers Pictures, is still there. Now officially, Adby and DeLuca are running things, but I don't think they're running things on their own. And as I said the other day, why was it they refused to have any Snyder Cut content in that DC documentary and they shoved Justice League content in it instead? That sniffs of the old regime, because James Gunn is an old regime man, because Emmerich brought him in, Hamada brought him in. So the question I'm asking today, are these people still involved? 100% yes, and I know I've spoken about this again, but it's very, very important with what's going on and what could happen that you understand that James Gunn was brought in as merely an influencer to sell the DCEU movies. He's failed. He's succeeded in selling comics. I spoke yesterday about selling comics. There's no value in selling comics unless they can market the actual films, live action and animation. And they can't even do that anymore because they've driven people away from comics with their wokeness as well. So there you have it, everyone. We've got this corrupt organisation claiming they're doing something brand new with DC Universe. Meanwhile, we know that basically the DCU is just recycling the DCEU. Just like Justice League recycled Zack Snyder's original Justice League movie. They're doing the same things all over again, and they're failing at it. They can see these DCEU movies are failing post-Snyder. You've got one of two decisions to make. You either bring Zack Snyder back to restore the Snyderverse, or you do a clean reboot of this with James Gunn. But as I say, James Gunn is, not in complete control, and his mission was to influence these remaining DCEU movies and make lots of money from them, and it hasn't worked because Zaslav underestimated this guy's popularity, because you can't tell me since Gunn's historical tweets have been revealed that his popularity hasn't taken a knock. And not everyone's going to come on Twitter and give you personal attacks, nor should they. I've never said anything to him about the historical tweets. I've tried to move on from the historical tweets and judge him on his content. As I say, I like his stuff. And as I've said before, he's not Coppola or Scorsese, but he can make a good CBM TV show like he did with Peacemaker, and like he's done with his Guardians trilogy and the Suicide Squad. And I do rate that as a good film. And I was stunned that it didn't make more money in theatres. So he's a filmmaker. That's where his strengths are, not in running a whole franchise. You've got people like Blu-ray Angel saying things like, well, of course Blue Beetle's going to fail. If you don't get the big characters like Batman and Superman right, how can you get the little characters right? No. Zack Snyder did get Superman and Batman right. He created something unique, something artistic that's worked for a lot of people who, no matter who makes a Batman and Superman film, Not everyone is going to agree in that direction. You wait and see what people say about Guns, Superman and Legacy. Because I don't, if you copy and paste Superman the movie with some cameos for the DCU, I think you're going to have a lot of problems. Because Superman the movie was great for the late 70s. But when that film's released, we're talking about 2025 people. And we must move on. And Snyder was trying to move on. And people were trying to drag him back to 1978. And that's the problem. I love Superman the movie. I still love Superman the movie. I will always love Superman the movie. This is not about saying that Richard Donner is an inferior director to Zack Snyder. Clearly he's not. He did Lethal Weapon, he did many films. The man was a genius. I love Dick Donner, I love Tom Mankiewicz and their work on Superman the movie. I wish they did the other 4 movies. We would have had such a leg up against Marvel today. But that's not the point. Times move on. And you can't remake Superman the movie. Now, I've enjoyed reading the Superman 78 graphic novels. I think they're great. And in comic book form, that's absolutely fine. But, yes, you want Superman to be a certain way. And I believe in Man of Steel, Henry's Superman was exactly how Superman should be. In personality, his relationship with his mother, his relationship with his father, his relationship with Lois is exactly what Clark and Superman is. And it was a Superman Begins movie. So I'll never understand the hate for that movie. I'll never understand the hate for the Snyderverse. But by the way, you have every right to dislike something if you don't like it. And that's fine. But the pure rejection of it just makes me laugh. But when we spoke about the corruptness of Rotten Tomatoes, and you can look me in the eye and say it, but you're not a serious person if you do. There's no way that Batman vs Superman, Dawn of Justice and Man of Steel should be getting rotten scores at the time of release or at this day and age. There's no way. You don't have to like the movie. But for those movies, those artistic visionary movies, to be rotten on Rotten Tomatoes tells you how corrupt the system is and how Marvel must have been doing something to basically, kibosh the DCEU, because they were involved with what was going on. It was very corrupt, and there must have been people at DC and WB who were working against Snyder and the DCEU. In fact, let me not be scared of getting in trouble over it. We know that's the case. And it's a big, big shame, because Snyder was doing something incredibly special. Something incredibly special that wasn't for everyone. But as I say, you've got to make the decision. Are you a box office juggernaut, or are you a studio for artists, visionaries, and, people who want to go to cinema and have an experience? We very rarely have a good experience anymore, everyone. And that's the problem we're in. And this is why Blue Beetle's going to flop. This is why The Flash flopped. And this is why Shazam! Fury of the Gods flopped. They are not cinematic events. There's something you go and see, and it's like you're watching something embarrassing. It's like you're seeing your old dad cracking a really lame joke in front of a hot woman, right? And you're thinking, he ain't with me. That's what Fury of the Gods is. That's what The Flash is. The thing when he's catching the babies, it's ridiculous. It's not funny. I don't understand it. The Wonder Woman cameos were not funny. They weren't fun. That wasn't the Gal Gadot Wonder Woman. I absolutely fell in love with in BVS. Fell in love with in the first Wonder Woman movie and in the Snyder Cut as well. That wasn't her, because Zack Snyder wasn't, he wasn't photographing her. Some other directors were, who just don't understand Wonder Woman. And I don't know how, but Zack Snyder absolutely understands Wonder Woman. What they did to him was outrageous. I'm just happy that I've got 3 outstanding DCEU movies by Zack Snyder. And I feel very, very privileged and happy. Yes, I've criticised Snyder in the past. I've said, I wouldn't have done this. I wouldn't have done that. I wouldn't have done a Superman Rebirth story in a Justice League movie. I stand by that. I wouldn't. It doesn't mean I don't love his DCEU movies, but everyone's a critic, right? That's the point. Because when people come at me and say, well, make your mind up, you either like him or not. I love him. but I'm allowed to criticize someone that I love, and that's very important as well. But this is why these movies have flopped, because they're not good movies. Blue Beetle is fundamentally trying to be an inclusive movie, and it does it in the wrong way. And this is where we are now. So in this big mess, we all warned WB, Jeff Johns and the rest of them, what would happen if they didn't let Snyder finish his arc. That wasn't a threat, that was advice. You can't dump someone and recycle what they were attempting to do in another direction. And this is what Gunn's doing again. They're trying to recycle the DCEU, cut the E out and call it DCU, but it's not a clean reboot. It's literally a continuation of the DCEU. The funny thing is, as I repeat every day on my shows, is the way he said, I'm keeping the things that worked and I'm not keeping the things that didn't. And I mean, really? And I mean, every day he's being shown up by someone on Twitter. He made the whole replacing Henry Cavill thing about age. And, you know, he said, oh, I want to focus on the early parts of Superman's life. That's why Henry isn't Superman anymore. That was just an excuse to justify replacing Henry. Because replacing Henry wasn't totally his decision. Because I believe somewhere we got Toby Emmerich. Now, Hamada has gone to another studio. But those people, the previous leadership that fucked everything up by getting rid of Snyder, I'm telling you, are there. As I said, if I'm so far from the truth, I'll say again, why did they refuse to have Snyder cut scenes in the DC documentary? And again, I'll repeat that they stubbornly insisted on Justice League clips from Justice League. Why? Why is that? If it's just James Gunn there, James Gunn wouldn't be doing this. James Gunn wouldn't insist of the Snyder Cut not being involved in a DC documentary. There's no way. It doesn't make sense. There's other people behind the scenes, and this is the problem. And this is the problem we had under Snyder. Too many cooks spoilt the broth. Too many leaders. And we don't really know who's in charge. We thought with Gunn coming in, at the very least, we'd get a clean reboot. We could start again. We'd be sad that Snyder wasn't coming back. But as I said earlier, at least we got 3 of his movies. And Gunn is a capable filmmaker. Maybe, even still, he could do something quite special. But if he's being micromanaged by Zaslav and Peter Safran and others, how is he going to be able to do his best work? And this, my friends, is the very reason that Blue Beetle is going to flop. Blue Beetle isn't a cinematic event. It's a Latino director deciding that all that matters is Latino representation. And that's the truth. And this is why this movie is going to flop. You can represent Latino people, but as I said earlier, you can't put them on a pedestal. You've got to treat women and people from different groups, right? Marginalized groups, as normal human beings and not treat them as special. We're all the same shit. So we want to see characters on a journey, getting an arc. What these people do, because they're representing women or, other people from marginalized groups, they think they have to do things in a certain way. That's why it's not working. And even the other day, WB through Variety or somebody else was saying, if Blue Beetle flops, then they won't do any more inclusive movies. That's absolutely blackmail. That's absolute blackmail. In other words, go and watch this movie or we won't represent people anymore. Who are the racists? Us or them? Think about it very, very carefully before you answer. They had an opportunity to make a great Jamie Reyes movie, and they didn't. I repeat, the physical costume is great. It's directed great. The director, in terms of his directing, did a good job. Not an exceptional one, but a good job. But this film is nothing special because they wasted most of the movie on the Latino family. And I don't care if you're Latino, white American, I don't want to spend over 2 hours of a superhero movie focusing on some boring, lame family. I've got enough problems with my family right now, let alone focusing on other families. So I'm not a big fan of families at the moment. But that's not what it's all about. And it's everything, the Fast and the Furious, it's family. The Shazam movies, it's family. It's boring. We're bored of its family. We want a great movie. We want to be entertained. Are you not entertained? No, I am not entertained by new Hollywood's attempts, miserable, laughing attempts of entertainment, because the entertainers have left the building. And all we've got now is political extremists making movies. And that is what Blue Beetle is. A movie of a political extremist, and that's why it's not going to make any money. It's not about either not having inclusion or having inclusion. Nothing to do with that. You can have great inclusion if you don't treat people from marginalised groups like they're going to break, if you actually give them a story and give them something interesting to do. Zolo Maradona doesn't have much of anything interesting to do. This is not his movie. It's hijacked by the entire family, and that's a shame. And you look at Susan Sarandon, she took a paycheck, and the less we say about her, the better. And eventually, when everyone's seen this movie, or whoever's going to see this movie, we'll talk about the post-credit scenes as well and what they mean, if they mean anything. I mean, it's such an insane situation. It really is. And they got themselves in this mess by getting rid of Snyder. You don't do it. I'm telling you, in the 80s and 90s, if there was a guy like Snyder making comic book movies, they would freeze him and try and preserve him so he would always be there. Snyder would have been more valued, and his plans for the DCEU would have been more valued 20, 30 years ago. But all of a sudden we had the MCU, Rotten Tomatoes being manipulated, all about Rotten Tomatoes scores, people dick waving with Rotten Tomatoes scores and box offices and cinema scores and bullshit like that. By the way, Blue Beetle got a B+ score, the same as Shazam Fury of the Gods, and I think the Flash movie as well. They were showing off about the Rotten Tomatoes scores, but let's be clear, those Blue Beetle Rotten Tomatoes scores were manipulated by extreme left critics, because I'm left-wing as well. I'm not right-wing. And if I was, I'd be proud of it. Whatever side you are on, it's absolutely fine. And I'm not a passionate political man. I don't even believe in the system. I've told you that before. I just want to enjoy my films. That's the point. This is where we are here. And this is where the problem is. And this is why they have destroyed cinema. And there is no, superhero fatigue. It's not about being fatigued on superheroes. It's about being fatigued on shit content made by people, political people, who have not really got any particular talent in making art and entertainment. And they're who have hijacked this industry. That's why it's gone down the shit heap. And this is why they're all on strike. It's a mess, everyone. And I don't see how this gets fixed. I don't know how DC gets fixed at this stage. But if it were me, if I was in charge right now and I had Zaslav's job, I would cancel the DCU. I would bring in filmmakers to make individual DC movies unconnected to other DC movies, like Matt Reeves are doing and how Todd Phillips is doing as well. I would bring people in to make individual unconnected TV shows. The day of connected universes is gone. The only people who have ever succeeded at this was the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and not even they're succeeding at it anymore. The audience is telling you that they're done with connected universe. What does Zaslav and WB do? Oh, let's have a connected universe when it's too little, too late. Why did the Batman make so much money? Why did Joker make so much money? Because these are great individual movies. People don't, there's some that do, but not enough. The box office for the MCU and the box office for the DCEU proves it. Of course, those Phase 4 and Phase 5 MCU movies are lame. Of course, the remaining DCEU movies are lame. I still love Black Adam. I still think it's a great movie, and I never lump in Black Adam with this other shit that is flopping. The Rock had some really, really good plans, and if they didn't want to go with Snyder's plans, I tell you what, The Rock's plans I think would have worked a lot better than what we're getting now. And who knows if Gunn's plan will succeed. It's not about Gunn's plan succeeding or failing, it's what he's done even before he comes to that plan. He has spoken too much. He has over-elaborated. He has confused the audience. And I'm starting to believe that he doesn't actually have much of a plan and he's just bullshitting us all.